Welcome, welcome, welcome back to Power Over Money, where we build wealth for the right reasons. I am your host, Eric, and our motto is BYO BTC. Bring your own BTC, get off zero, do the work, get to one, and then build value in the world. So today we are just going to be taking the time to kind of celebrate. Over the last week, we took a breather. We almost hit $100,000. Everybody was very excited. Bitcoin said, not yet. But we're going to see today that maybe that not yet is sometime soon. And we're going to hopefully get a better understanding of what's going to come down for the rest of the year, for next 2025. Ideally, what we want to do is keep our heads on straight, not get shaken out of the market. When there are dips, there will be dips. There's always going to be dips. And then look at all of that like it's a discount, because what we're doing is we're accumulating the scarcest asset humanity has ever created, a pristine digital commodity that is going to allow us to store our value and give us a foundation to create better value in the world. So let's kick it off. I'm going to share my screen, and ideally from here, we will be able to really dive into some of the concepts. So I want to start off with this tweet by Jim Kreider, and he says, I feel bad for people who shake their head and say you were right about Bitcoin. But what they're referring to is an arbitrary value they're conceding was reached. Bitcoin hit 90,000 today. Bitcoin hit 100,000 today. Oh man, I should have bought one when it was 10,000. No, you should buy one Bitcoin. It doesn't matter if it's $10, $10,000, $100,000. If you understand Bitcoin, if you understand the entire underlying premise, you realize that it only matters how much Bitcoin you have, not how much that Bitcoin is worth in any particular dollar, in any particular dollar amount. Because if you have one Bitcoin, yes, it's worth $100,000 in American dollars, give or take, but it could be worth $1 million in another country. It could be worth $1 trillion in another country, depending on the country. So the dollar value, in fiat currency, the currency that's created by any particular country, does not matter. It matters how much Bitcoin you have, and that is going to continue to matter even more going into the future. And we know this because the top is not what's happening. It's not that Bitcoin's value is going off in relation to the dollar. It's that Bitcoin is being recognized as valuable by more people. So yes, its intrinsic value is going up, but at the same time, the dollar value and its intrinsic value is going down because it's being printed out of existence. Fun fact. Bitcoin has as many users as the internet did in 1997. So when you are getting in your head and you're like, oh man, I should have bought in, just buy, just get off zero. If you could have bought the internet, if you could invest in the internet in 1997, think about the explosive growth, the things that the internet allowed for you to be able to create. Social media wouldn't exist without the internet. Mobile phones wouldn't exist without the internet. All streaming services wouldn't exist without the internet. Podcasts wouldn't exist without the internet, right? All of these things that now define our everyday lifestyle would not exist without the internet. And because that platform was created, a ton of other things were created. Bitcoin is a platform. It's a protocol. It's just a foundation layer. And we are so early to that. You have to remember that so that you don't get scared or get greedy based on the dollar value of the market. And it's really important you remember this. This particular tweet is a little bit lengthy, but basically it's saying that when you're a Bitcoiner and you develop that conviction to hold on for dear life, hodl, you are gonna go through a ton of psychological tests. Now, you probably went through it originally when we went from $67,000 to close to $100,000. You're like, man, it's up 30, 40% since I invested. And then boom, we came back down to 93, and you're like, oh, is it going to go further? And you're getting scared. And if you made the wrong mistake, you sold, right? Bitcoin now today is, I think, worth $97,000. But you're still pricing everything you're doing in an artificial dollar valuation. It does not matter about the dollar. Bitcoin does not care about the dollar, but you're hesitating because you do. You're still measuring your wealth in dollars, even though you know they would be printed infinitely. Spend more time learning about Bitcoin. When you do, you will realize the dollar valuation is just a handy measure of adoption. And that metric truly matters. And the metric that truly matters is the one all Bitcoins are aiming for, which is acquiring more Bitcoin. It's the only goal. It's the only goal. This goes back to you basically buying the internet in 1997. Scottie Pippen, if you don't know, is an extreme Bitcoin maximalist. He is super into it. He's a little wonky. If you see any of his tweets, it's interesting. It's funny to say the least. But he's right in terms of reposting his image, because I've seen it before. Basically, Bitcoin is code and it is developed. It's not static. There are new things being created on Bitcoin every single day. Bitcoin has its own meme coins now. So the development that's occurring on this protocol from a stage perspective has us around this level from when you look at the arc of the technology on a cell phone perspective. We're not at the beginning, but we're nowhere near the end. And the amount of functionality that fits on a phone based on originally, right? People have computers in their hands. We're basically all magicians. You can click a button and food will pop up on your doorstep. Like you're magic with your cell phone in your hand. Bitcoin's not there yet. So imagine the world that Bitcoin will facilitate when all of this technology is introduced. You're early. So just buy and hold as long as possible. And I said it, right? This tweet happened about 6 days ago. So we're talking about 24 days ago, Bitcoin was $67,000. Like, come on. There are very few assets on the planet that allow for that level of growth. In that level of like systematic, measured, guaranteed accretion. The value of Bitcoin accretes. It grows on a regular schedule. And it is both a measure of its internal clock, the way that it spits out blocks systematically on a very regular basis, the way its issuance schedule gets shorter and shorter and shorter every 4 years, the halving cycle, and its adoption rate, the human part of it, people actually putting their time and energy, and more people doing so into the network we call Bitcoin. And because that stuff is so perfectly tuned, because Bitcoin is so finely created, and because it's so decentralized, this is something that I don't think most people realize. I didn't know it until I read it today. Bitcoin hit $1,000 on November 28th, 2013. It hit $10,000 on November 28th, 2017. And it could hit $100,000 on November 28th, 2024. Like that's just, you cannot fake this level of perfect execution, right? And I'm not saying Bitcoin is not fallible, but what I'm saying is it's the best incentive structure that humanity's ever created from both an economic and productivity perspective. Bitcoin takes energy, it does a calculation, and it creates an asset. That asset has to be then invested in by people, by the shareholders and stakeholders that are surrounding the Bitcoin industrial complex. The miners have to want to create the Bitcoin, spend the money on electricity to create the Bitcoin. This is not something that's cheap. The machines that create Bitcoin at scale are the same machines that power AI models. Like they're NVIDIA chips. They are extremely expensive and they're extremely powerful. So people are putting real money behind it. There's someone investing their dollars and time to create the Bitcoin. There are investors, the people that take their time, their hard-earned money and play and store it in the asset we call Bitcoin. There are validators that spend their money to run a node to validate transactions as they go across the network. And there are the doubters. What we don't realize is that the doubters of Bitcoin are also an extremely important part of the Bitcoin industrial complex. They're just as much a shareholder and stakeholder in the network as everybody else is. And the reason why that's really important is because without the doubters, the system doesn't mature. The developers in the system who spend their time and energy to create the code that runs the Bitcoin network, that people run on their computers to operate the Bitcoin network, those developers look at the doubters and they say, how can I make that person doubt the system less, have it easier for them to adopt the system, to join the network? So I have to create better user interfaces. I have to create functionality that makes sense to them and incentivizes them to join the network. So all of these people come together to create the Bitcoin industrial complex, and all of it has landed itself perfectly to give us these wonderful numbers. And if this one is right, maybe we hit $1 million. That would be an amazing, amazing number, but we can all see. So this particular, we've seen this particular chart before. I've shown it in previous videos, but this is the $900 trillion of value that was created, that currently exists in the economic sphere, right? There's $900 trillion circulating in the global economy, and it's either stored in one of these buckets. Bitcoin is only $1.8 trillion. You have real estate, you have bonds, you have cash, you have equities, cars and collectibles, art, all of this. The funny thing is Bitcoin is eating every single one of these buckets. MicroStrategy purchases Bitcoin, places it on their treasury. The value of their equities goes up. So now there are going to be publicly traded companies who have Bitcoin-backed treasuries. So now that Bitcoin's eating into this equity pile, right? Bitcoin also has an ETF. So instead of investing in Apple or Microsoft or Meta, now I can invest directly in Bitcoin as an exchange traded fund, which acts as an equity. Bitcoin is money. We know this. There are people that actually use it as cash in other countries. They can purchase small items, big items. It doesn't matter. It's better and more secure and holds value better than their current currency. MicroStrategy is pioneering Bitcoin-backed convertible bonds, which basically means that I'm going to sell you some debt. I'm going to take the money you give me. I'm going to go buy Bitcoin with it. So if there's ever any default, I have Bitcoin as the collateral. Bitcoin is pristine collateral. There are companies now that are taking mortgages and having the mortgages, instead of just being backed by the property, so you can foreclose on the property and just take the property and the land and sell it somewhere else. A portion of that revenue is a portion of the mortgage is also going to purchase Bitcoin. So now you have mortgages backed by Bitcoin. Art, you can inscribe art directly onto Bitcoin, meaning you can take a JPEG, you can take an image, you can take anything you want, inscribe it directly into a Satoshi, or you can take a digital identifier that represents real world assets and then lock that into a Satoshi on Bitcoin. Same thing with cars. And then, of course, Bitcoin is digital gold because it protects against inflation far better, and it's way more transportable than gold is. So Bitcoin is eating every single one of these buckets. If Bitcoin goes from, what is this, 0.1%? No, it's got to be even less than that. The percentage level of Bitcoin of the global $900 trillion value asset, the total asset market value, if it just gets to 10%, you're talking about a $4 to $5 million Bitcoin, right? It's only math, and the adoption rate has not slowed. So as the adoption rate increases, this gets bigger, these get smaller, or they integrate into Bitcoin, which means that Bitcoin shares that value with these buckets. And the reason why that's going to happen is because it's not just you competing against your friends and maybe you're competing against one company here or whatever. You are now competing against the entire planet, realizing that Bitcoin is the best digital commodity ever created. It's the hardest asset ever created. And it has the ability to not only create value in the world, but store value already created. So Bitcoin is almost $100,000. No S&P 500 companies have adopted it. No major countries have adopted it. There are some countries, but they're not like G7 type countries as their primary treasury reserve asset. And a majority of people in the world still have less than 1% allocation. If your portfolio, if your net worth is, call it $1 million, 1% allocation is $100,000. Nope, even less, $10,000. If you're worth $1 million and all you're putting in is $10,000 into Bitcoin, it means you don't understand Bitcoin. It means you don't understand the value that it can provide. And I can't get you, I can bring you to the water, but you got to drink it. And it's a lot of water. And you're going to get full and then you're going to get thirsty. Because what happens with Bitcoin is you start learning about it and you become insatiable. You want to know more about it. Everything about it becomes, it opens your eyes to bigger things, to macroeconomics, to how energy works globally, to how countries have been indebted, work on a debt cycle, and how that debt destroys their fiat currency, which means it destroys the value you create in that fiat currency. It changes the way you think about your life and how you create economic value in the world. And everything else you realize is tied from that level. So if your current allocation is zero, get off zero. If your current allocation is less than 1%, get off less than 1%. If you don't have a full Bitcoin, get to a full Bitcoin. All I'm saying is do all of that and then do the researches alongside it. Now, I'm not going to necessarily play this video, but Michael Saylor here, CEO of MicroStrategy, he basically says that the minimum time frame for holding Bitcoin is 4 years, because no one has ever lost money in 4 years. It doesn't matter if you bought at the absolute top. If you wait 4 years and go to the bottom and it will come back up, you'll at least be break even. But most people who wait 4 years will have earned money during that time frame. So the minimum time to hold Bitcoin is 4 years. A good time frame to hold it is 10, and the most ideal time frame to hold it is forever. Bitcoin will be around for at least a century, which means that your kid can give it to their kid, can give it to their kid, can give it to their kid. And if you have that level of value that's secured and protected in the way that Bitcoin is, you'll be delivering value all the way down your bloodline. This particular video is hilarious. I'm not going to necessarily play it, but the premise is that someone goes out and they ask a bunch of questions and they ask a bunch of people this question: would you prefer a Taylor Swift ticket or one Bitcoin? At the time they ask it, the Bitcoin is worth $90,000. You would be surprised how many people said a Taylor Swift ticket, from men to women, everybody. And even when someone was told that a Bitcoin is worth $90,000, because they don't understand it, it's too risky, it's not something they want to think about, they would still choose the Taylor Swift ticket. Again, most people are clueless. They are not seeing it coming. It's going to be overnight. Someone's going to look up Bitcoin's going to be $1 million. I'm going to be like, why didn't anybody tell me? I'm telling you right now, get off zero, get to one, protect that thing forever. All right. And the reason we keep talking about it, but there's only so much Bitcoin left to be made. Bitcoin is made. It is calculated and created into existence using an algorithm plus actual electricity plus actual energy. Those two combined creates a block. That block is written into with all the transactions that have been validated, and that block is tied to a forever ledger. That those ledgers will never be destroyed. It's what we call immutable. It can never change. There are only so many blocks left to be created. There's only so many Bitcoin left to be created. And the last one, all the way over here, when we're finally done, will be created in 2140. Okay. So the very last few Bitcoin that will be created in existence will be created over the next 100 years, a little bit over that. The rest of them are in existence. And a good fourth of this pie, maybe not a fourth, maybe an eighth, about 4 to 6 million coins are lost forever. People have them in computers. Those computers are in landfills now. Satoshi's wallet has 1 million Bitcoin in it. It's never moved and probably never will. At the end of the day, there's only so much to fight over. And what's happening right now is that there are multiple countries and multiple states in the United States of America who are enacting laws to buy Bitcoin as a government. So when the government owns Bitcoin, when the government starts to buy Bitcoin, they can buy 50, $100,000, 50,000 Bitcoin, 100,000 Bitcoin at a time in one go. Where's that Bitcoin going to go? It's going to go into a wallet and it's never going to leave. So you have less to be able to get. And what happens when an asset that has a finite supply and an explosive demand, something has to give. And because this doesn't give and this only grows, price has to give. And price will exponentially skyrocket. In 10 years, anyone with no Bitcoin will claim Bitcoiners got lucky, but they didn't. They didn't get lucky because owning Bitcoin is hard. It's very difficult. You have to understand it, because if you don't understand it, you will give it away. You will get it. Maybe you'll get a little value out of it. You'll accrete some value in USD. Oh man, my money went from, it grew 20%, it grew 25%. I doubled my money. And then you'll give that Bitcoin away. And someone who understands Bitcoin will take it from you and will keep it forever. So when you do the work and you spend long enough with Bitcoin, not only do you know that it's not a Ponzi scheme, because there's too many people involved with it, it's an industrial complex. A Ponzi scheme only has two interested parties: the manipulated and the manipulator. The manipulator pulls value out of the manipulated. And at a certain point, when you can no longer add more people to the pie, the manipulator, everything falls out from under them. Bitcoin doesn't work that way. People are not putting their money into Bitcoin. The people that keep Bitcoin, that understand Bitcoin, don't put value into Bitcoin so that they can get dollars out. They want Bitcoin. It's it. It just so happens that the way it works so well that each Bitcoin becomes more valuable over time, but they don't care. They don't care, right? They know that Bitcoin itself is what they want, because they can store their value there and use it in other ways that allow them to be more productive in the future. So they buy as much as they can and they hold it for as long as possible. And it's not luck, it's conviction. Now, there's a psychology. We talked about the psychology of $100,000, where we're going to get to that, and it's going to be really hard to break through that number. And then once we break through it, we're probably going to float around it for a while. But the truth is, once we break through $100,000, it's very likely we are going to scream as fast as possible to $200,000. And that's because the difference between $1 and $2, that space is also a psychological gap. People who are like, I don't believe in Bitcoin, or I don't have enough Bitcoin, or it's not valuable yet enough for me for whatever reason. Once Bitcoin hits $100,000, most people are going to be like, damn, okay, that's real. That's not a joke. Maybe I should have some. And what they're going to say is, I should get in before it's $200,000, because at $100,000, I can 6 to 10x my money. But as soon as we hit $200,000, it's only a 5x. That's max. That's the most amount I can have. Right. So there is this psychological cycle that will kick in, that as soon as we hit $100,000, we're going to hit 200,000 really quickly, because people are going to want to FOMO in before that leading digit rolls over. Once it rolls over to 2, then people will slow down and be like, all right, it's fine. But what they don't realize is that we're going to scream to 2, and then we're going to scream to $1 million. This is my personal belief because I understand what the demand level is occurring right now. It is not just individuals buying Bitcoin, sitting in maybe buying a Lamborghini, crypto bros like that ethos, that era is gone. We're talking about the asset managers of the world, the countries, the states, everybody with the most money on the planet is buying Bitcoin. And when they aren't able to buy Bitcoin, they buy MicroStrategy because their bylaws, the rules of their organization, whether pension funds or insurance companies, they're not able to buy Bitcoin directly. They're not even able to buy the Bitcoin ETF. Instead, they can invest in AAA rated convertible bonds and corporate bonds. They can buy treasury bonds, they can buy corporate bonds, they can buy bonds, right? That's how their company is created. Guess what? MicroStrategy has said, hey, I'm going to create a bond. I'm going to sell it to you and I'm going to go buy Bitcoin. That'll be your Bitcoin exposure. And what happens is because the value of their stock goes up, they get more money to be able to go issue more bonds to go buy more Bitcoin. So Germany sold all of its Bitcoin at like $52,000 back in I think the summer of this year. Germany sold. They had like I don't know 50,000 Bitcoin or something like that. They sold all of it. But most recently, this week, in fact, one of the largest insurance companies called Alliance in Germany just bought MicroStrategy convertible bonds because they're backed by Bitcoin. So even when the nation decides not to invest in Bitcoin directly, the economy, the actual operators of the economy, people, large industrial players decide it's worth it. And they use those different routes in order to buy Bitcoin. So MicroStrategy has opened the door to large institutions that wouldn't have access before. Nation states are going after Bitcoin directly through Bitcoin strategic reserve laws. States are doing it. There are currently 10 states in the United States of America that are actively working on a law to invest their own state reserve dollars into Bitcoin. So what's going to happen to the price when all of these people are purchasing it? Texas itself has like $3 billion in surplus. If they put $1 billion of that, price is going to go up, right? Like the United States could spend $50 billion and buy $100,000, $200,000 Bitcoin. It's not a lot of money to us, right? We can print it at demand and then just buy money with the printed dollars. So if you think that you have time left, I'm telling you that time is almost over. There will become a point where you will not be able to own a full Bitcoin without winning the lottery, running an extremely successful company, selling that company, and taking most of the proceeds to go buy Bitcoin with, right? Unless you're a tech startup and you sell your company and you net $50 million and you can take $1 million of it, people are going to have to put their entire net worth into Bitcoin in order to own an entire Bitcoin. And at a certain point, that's not going to be enough. Just looking at this image, we're talking about Bitcoin was 55K in 2021, February. I don't know. Maybe tomorrow it'll be 100K. Maybe tomorrow's the day. I'm excited about it. I don't know about you. By 2040, anybody that owns an entire Bitcoin, we just sort of talked about this. Anybody that owns an entire Bitcoin by 2040 will be looked at like they are an alien. Like what? Right? When you think about like, oh, you're a billionaire, like the amount of gap between the accessibility of that's what's going to happen for people who own full Bitcoins. And this individual is speaking specifically about the idea that most of us think we're too late to Bitcoin. But what if you're too early? So I'm just going to share this tab very quickly. And hopefully you'll be able to hear it.
I experienced at the halving party in El Salvador. I got a question from the audience from I think it was a 9 or 10-year-old saying, "Is it too late to buy Bitcoin? You are buying it at $1. It's at $60,000 or $70,000, and is it too late?" And I thought about it for a second, and it struck me that actually I'm way, way too early, because the world that Bitcoin is creating, by the time it starts to get mature and we see what this is all about, I'll be gone, right? I'll be gone. I won't actually be living during the Bitcoin era of plenty. So I was too early, right? The people who are buying it now, people who are getting into it now, are about to enter into a life that no civilization has ever known before. Everybody, pays the price, gets the price they deserve. And so that has a multiple ways you can look at that.
I think that is extremely profound. Just going back to the idea that Bitcoin right now is effectively what the internet was in 1997. And the explosive growth, all of the things that were created on top of the internet that pushed humanity forward, right? You would not have self-driving cars. You wouldn't have GPS like that at scale. You wouldn't have social media. You wouldn't have mobile. You wouldn't have podcasts. You wouldn't have Netflix and streaming services. You wouldn't have the ability to send a message to anybody on the planet. You wouldn't have global commerce. There would be no Temu. You wouldn't be able to click a button and have someone drop food off at your door. So no DoorDash, no Uber. All of these companies exist on the internet. And that's happened in, the internet was commercialized a while ago, but really when it took off, you call it the dot-com bubble. So anywhere between 1997 and 2001, when it was in enough homes for people to really look at it as a viable commercial opportunity. That's the difference. Bitcoin is not in enough homes to be looked at as a commercial viability. But there are people who are smart enough to see the future that are building on top of Bitcoin right now. And if you own imagine owning a piece of the internet. So 30 years from now, what will the world look like after we've built an entire new financial operating system on top of Bitcoin and tied it into everything? The internet is tied into everything we do. Everything we do. What happens when Bitcoin is tied into everything we do? If you could put a dollar value on the value of the internet, what would that be? Right? We said the global economic sphere is $900 trillion. How much of that is supported by the internet? People don't buy stocks by walking in a door, giving someone money and taking paper back. They buy stocks by clicking a button on their phone that's operated on the internet. So Bitcoin will do for money what the internet did for information. The internet created a free-flowing atmosphere of information. And now Bitcoin will create a free-flowing atmosphere for money. And we are going to, and more importantly, not just money, economic value. Because it doesn't matter if it's cash, it doesn't matter if it's real estate, it doesn't matter if it's a good or service that I've created. If I create economic value, I'll then be able to put that into Bitcoin and send it anywhere in the world or amplify it anywhere in the world because of Bitcoin. That is the difference. Now, you could say potentially the technology under Bitcoin, what we call the blockchain, is really what's pronounced allowing that transition. But Bitcoin's the biggest bear in the room, biggest elephant in the room, and it has the highest market value. So it is going to be what leads that ship. So we are at the cusp. I don't want to spend too much time knocking you over the head with that understanding, but I will leave you with this one final tweet. And that is, Bitcoin is perfect money. That sentence takes 2 seconds to hear. It takes 2 hours to explain. Just imagine how long I've been putting these videos out, and all together it's more than 2 hours. It takes 2 months to believe, and it takes 2 years to understand. This is really important. This is what I mean by doing the work, right? If you don't understand all the players, we talked about the Bitcoin industrial complex. There are miners, economically incentivized people, miners and validators who get paid operating the network. They either get paid for creating the creating the Bitcoin, or they get paid for validating transactions on the network. Then you have investors and influencers. I put these people in the same boat because they're economically incentivized by putting value into the network, but indirectly. So I'm not going to create or validate. I'm going to invest my dollars. So I'm just going to store money there. Influencers go out and create value on top of the network by evangelizing, by becoming the evangelist, being an ambassador of Bitcoin, creating podcasts, creating ethos, creating an understanding, creating personas, and then getting paid because they are so emphatic and wholehearted about their belief about Bitcoin. And then there's a final set of people that I think are overlooked in the Bitcoin industrial complex, and that is the doubters. The doubters, and we may have touched on this already, but the doubters are people that are just as important because they force the system to become more palatable to more people. And without them, it would just be this cypherpunk sitting in the back. Oh, that's the kids in the basement just sitting away coding, the hacker mentality. Bitcoin's grown past that. It has been commercialized. Now, is it a commercial entity in every home? Not yet, but it will be, right? Wait till the day when the iPhone has a digital wallet where you can own Bitcoin just like you can store your credit card. That will be the day that you know Bitcoin has hit absolute maturation, right? Until then, look for Apple. Look for Apple to purchase it for their own treasury. So, we are currently at the cusp of something absolutely phenomenal, and I want people to understand it is not about the dollar value increase. Sure, you have enough money, you could turn it into an absolutely life-changing amount of money in US dollar terms in the next year. You could. But what's going to happen is if you do not have the right mindset, you are either going to take that money, sell your Bitcoin, and then go spend the money. And then okay, now you don't have the value anymore. It's gone. You've given it up to somebody else. Or you're going to make that money and then you're going to think you're rich. And then you're going to watch Bitcoin's volatility cycle come back around. And you're going to see the price go down in US dollar terms. And you're going to sell your Bitcoin late. And you're going to sell it as that was a scam. See, I knew it, because you haven't done the work. You didn't realize that Bitcoin works in a cycle. When it goes up, it goes down. It goes up for 3 years and down for 1. Up for 3 years and down for 1. The problem is the down for 1 is a serious drop. Now, I would say that that's likely to become less of an issue as institutions begin to buy it, because they're going to be less likely to sell. But at the end of the day, it's, for me, BYOBTC, bring your own Bitcoin. Get off 0, get to 1, do the work so you can give that 1 or that 1 plus Bitcoin, however many you can acquire, to the next generation. Protect it, lock it down. Don't get caught by scammers. Don't think you can double your money overnight. Don't hook your hot wallets up to random websites. Don't fall for the QR code scams. Oh, if you send me a Bitcoin, I'll send you one too back. Don't do anything but accumulate and protect your Bitcoin, because we're not talking about how rich you'll be in US dollar terms a year from now. We're talking about how literally unfathomably secure and wealthy you will be 10, 20, 30 years from now, and how that will cascade into every generation that comes after you. We want power over money because we're building wealth for the right reasons. Listen, I appreciate y'all. Make sure you click the like button. Subscribe so you know when the next video comes out. Have an absolutely wonderful Thanksgiving. Pop some champagne for me if we hit $100,000 tomorrow, like we might. I don't know. And at the end of the day, keep stacking. Keep stacking. And when we are all super solidly wealthy and we're creating real value in the world, that's when we can switch gears into what's next. All right. Appreciate everything you guys are doing. And I will talk to you on the flip side.